All right. And so today we're talking about organic foods. And um, Miss Cheryl, are you on our text thread as well? Is that how you found the workshop? Okay. I She may not be able to respond right now. Um, but you know what? I appreciate that you guys get on at different times of the day just to have an opportunity to learn something. And so you're not always in a position to be really interactive. So that's just fine. All right. So you've all gotten the messages. And so what we're going to start with is a little activity that kind of quizzes you on that dirty dozen that we talked about versus our clean 15. And you remember that these are the lists sent out by the Environmental Working Group. Hi, good to have you back, Cheryl. Um, when I left, I was just saying, you know what, there's no pressure to participate. I think you get more out of this if you're able to engage, but I know folks do all sorts of things on Saturday mornings, and I'm just happy to have you here learning something. So if you can only listen in, it's all good. So the Environmental Working Group um, analyzes these uh, analyzes this database that the government has put together, measuring the pesticides. So, like, how many pesticides or how many uh, different types of pesticides are found on a wide range of fruits and veggies. And then they come up with this list that notes the clean 15, so the 15 foods that are least likely to have pesticide residues in their non-organic form, or the dirty dozen, so the dozen or the 12 fruits and veggies that are more likely to give you pesticide residues in their non-organic form. And so that's what we're going over today. And I'm gonna just throw out some names of food. And this is kind of like a flashcard workshop sort of thing. And whoever's able to, I want you guys to just kind of yell out dirty dozen or clean 15. Okay. All right. So we're going to start with avocados. Dirty dozen.
Clean 15.
Yes. You said that nice and strong. Absolutely. Yes. Avocados are in the clean 15. Okay. Strawberries.
Dirty dozen.
Yes. All right. Onions. That's a tricky one.
Not sure.
Not sure. I love it. That's how we learn. So that's in the clean 15.
Clean 15. Okay.
Yep. Okay, frozen sweet peas, like you get out of the frozen food section. Just the little green peas.
Clean 15.
Clean 15. You got it. Um, Kale.
Dirty dozen.
Mm-hmm. Collard greens.
Dirty dozen.
Okay. Wow. And tomatoes.
Mm. Not sure.
Not sure. Dirty dozen. Dirty.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
excellent. So, okay, you guys are doing a really good job. Maddie, really, you're carrying the team. This is super impressive. So the question is, had you heard of Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen before you got these text messages from me? Or was this a new concept?
No, I have heard of them before.
Okay, okay.
Mm.
That helps. So this isn't completely new for you. Um, how do you think about what's in the clean 15 and what's in the dirty dozen? Like, did you just memorize it, or do you have um, some sort of guidance that you use? Like, is there a framework in your head for guessing when you're in the grocery store what what's clean and what's in the dirty dozen?
No, I guess because I have seen the list several times.
So you
So
just
I
have
guess
to
it just sort of sticks in my head. Some of them sort of sticks in my head.
okay, okay. So, um, here's what I'm gonna share my screen now, and we're gonna take a look at the clean 15. So you should see a bunch of squares with a bunch of green on the screen,
Mm-hmm.
and starts with avocados at the top left. So you guys can get to this list anytime you want by just Googling clean 15. Um, and the Environmental Working Group, this EWG.org, is the website where you're going to find Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. Now, they update this, I think it's every year or at least every few years. So I do encourage you to go back and check these on your own. Um, Sometimes the foods on this list or their order actually does change because of changed practices in farming, food production, all that stuff. So now you've got this resource, but here's the basic rule, or a few basic rules that can help you figure out whether you need to buy something organic in order to avoid the pesticide residues, or whether you can buy it non-organic. So is it in the clean 15 or not? Basically, the foods that have a very thick skin tend to be in the clean 15. So just think about like the way that foods grow and the way they're exposed to pesticides. So the foods that have a thick skin that you don't eat, the pesticides residues may infiltrate the skin, but then you're throwing that away, right? So avocados are on that clean 15 list. Pineapples are on that clean 15 list. Again, super thick skin. Corn that comes in a husk, that's basically like its thick skin, is on that list, clean 15. Sweet peas, this stumped me for a moment, but remember, sweet peas come in their own version of kind of a husk. Uh, the like flat green beans, before you remove that fibrous covering and get to these tiny little peas. So then papayas, they're super thick as well, thick skin on the outside. Onions too. Eggplant also has a thick skin. However, we do eat the skin of the eggplant. So that brings us to kind of the next broad rule. So the first one was generally when foods have a very thick skin that's inedible or that we don't eat, they're on the clean 15 list because, the skin protects them. But then there are all these other foods that are either grown underground or are grown very close to the ground. So, like, broccoli and cauliflower, they erupt and they're kind of partially underground, but they've got all these leaves surrounding them and they kind of just creep around along the ground. Um, Cabbage is similar, growing largely underground. Uh, and so you've got these foods where here's kind of how I've explained it to myself. I don't know if this is exactly the perfect explanation, but um, it's possible that the soil leaches away the pesticides. So for the foods that are, uh-oh, can you guys see the slide? I see some folks are commenting in the chat.
Yes, I can see them.
Okay, yeah, Maddie, you see them. John, you mentioned John.
All I see, it just says that Dr. Wusa started screen sharing. So
Huh,
um, maybe that's on my side.
All right. Well, I'm sorry about that. Um, John, if you need to log out and log back in, feel free. I'll let you back in. But
Okay, maybe I'll do that.
otherwise, you know what you can do if you're able to on your device is if you can go to the Environmental Working Group website and follow along with us at Clean 15. So if you just Google Clean 15 EWG,
Okay.
then you'll get to the webpage that we're looking at right now.
Okay. I'm gonna try this. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, thanks for pointing that out. We do want all of you all to get the benefit of seeing all this info. So, okay, so what was I saying? We talked about the one kind of guideline in the basic framework for what is going to make a food clean, or what's going to put it on the clean 15 list, and the one was thick skin that we don't eat. And then the next one, which I gotta tell you, I've kind of just like pulled out of thin air here because of of looking at the patterns, but but the thought is that perhaps what some of these other foods in common is that what they have in common is that they grow along the dirt. And so maybe the soil is actually leaching some of the pesticides away from the food and protecting them in a sense. And so maybe that explains kind of cauliflower and broccoli and cabbage, kiwi, honeydew, and cantaloupe. Again, they are foods that have a thick skin that we don't typically eat. Mushrooms, I don't know what the deal is with mushrooms, but I'm really glad to know that mushrooms are on the Clean 15 list because organic mushrooms are so much more expensive than non-organic. All right. Any thoughts? Maddie, are there any patterns that automatically stand out to you? Because I know you've seen this before. Now that we've gone over it, is there like,
No.
okay, cool. So we've got a few guidelines, and I think that's helpful because obviously there are more fruits and veggies in the world and even in your supermarket than will appear in these 27 items, right? We've got the clean 15 items, and then we've got the dirty dozen 27 items. And they're more fruits and veggies than that. So the Environmental Working Group does provide a more complete list that I think involves more than 30 fruits and veggies. It's measured some that end up kind of floating somewhere in between the clean 15 and the dirty dozen in terms of their rankings. But you can just imagine, right? Um, there are just there are going to be ways to generalize when you're in the grocery store. If this food isn't on the dirty dozen and it isn't in the clean 15, kind of guess like where does it fall so that you can make up your own mind. All right. And I'm just going to check the chat here. I'll stop sharing for a second and check the chat just to make sure. Oh, good. It's working for Cheryl and
Yes.
that is excellent. All right, Cheryl. So it's so good to meet you.
It's nice to meet you also.
Yes, thank you for being here. Were you, I know you had to switch devices. Were you able to kind of keep track of what we were talking about with the Clean 15?
Right, I was, and I also got the messages this week about the Clean 15. And I
Good.
had asked a question about, washing vegetables when you get them and all of that. Yeah.
Oh, that was you who asked that. That was such a good question. So that's like you read my mind, Cheryl, because I think that was the next message that went out the next day or maybe a couple days later. And so we'll talk about that today. So
Okay, great.
guys, Cheryl asked this really good question in the text chat. You know that whenever I send a message, you can respond to me. You can ask a question and I will respond back. Generally, the day that I respond to all questions would be Wednesday. So if you ask on like a Tuesday or so. If it's not really
Mhm.
time sensitive, I might just kind of wait till our Wellness Wednesday when we do the question and answer on the text chat. But please don't ever hesitate to just send the message. Um, I've helped, I've gone back and forth with lots of folks just having these conversations. So Cheryl said, okay, what's the best way to clean fruits and veggies? And it turns out that yes, soap and water is just fine. Like taking your dish soap, putting it put a bunch of water in a bowl, little drops of dish soap, put your vegetables or your fruits in it, and then just sort of wring it out. Just sort of wipe the surface and then rinse it afterwards. The thing to know though, and I don't know if this is what you might have been getting at, Cheryl, the thing to know is when you wash your fruits and veggies, you may remove some pesticide residues,
Mhm.
but it's
Mhm.
not a foolproof way to remove the residues. So I'm about to show you the Dirty Dozen list.
Okay, great.
And
Great.
believe it or not, these 12 items, their pesticide measurements were taken after they were cleaned
Wow.
with soap and
Okay.
water.
Okay.
Yeah. So still a great idea to wash our fruits and veggies because there are all sorts of other residues like animal waste and you know other chemicals that sort of build up on the outside of these fruits and veggies.
Mm.
Still want to wash them, but that's not a foolproof way of removing the pesticide residues as this Dirty Dozen list will show us. So I'm so glad you asked that question, Cheryl. All right. And then while I've, got you on and things are working,
Mhm.
I'll ask you, Cheryl, had you heard of the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 before we started texting about them?
I had heard about some of the clean 15, but I don't think it was 15. It might have been 10. So I hadn't heard of the 15. But and I have not heard, I've heard of the Dirty Dozen and also about, how to effectively clean, different tips. If you Google will tell you a lot of things, some true, some not. But I think the best thing the one thing that I carry away or really resonate with me on the text that you responded to was um, when you're eating things like apples, you have to make sure that your knife is clean and that you actually clean, even if you're going to eat the skin, like in an apple or something like that, nectarine, that you make sure that you really clean it because you might be dragging some of the whatever that's on that fruit or vegetable back into your cut. Um, and I grow some vegetables, so I was really pleased to see the ones that I grow on the Clean 15. So that's a good thing.
Good. That's really good. And yeah, I mean, you bring up a really great point, right? We're having this giant conversation about which fruits and veggies we can feel safe eating non-organic. Um,
Exactly.
because the big manufacturers have just not used many pesticides on them or aren't likely to use as many pesticides. But one way to get around this worry about is it organic, is it not, is it on the Clean 15 list or not, one way to get around that is what you said you do, Cheryl, which is,
Mm-hmm.
grow your own. Because you
Mm-hmm.
know what you're putting. You don't always know the
Mm-hmm.
soil content, but I guess a lot of home farmers might get their soil evaluated and you know what type of fertilizer you use and you know what
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
pesticides, if any, you use. Yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful. I love that.
And I kind of go for the soap and water pesticides or the vinegar and water pesticides or the tobacco juice to keep things from around the ground and just try to keep it as simple as possible without going into Home Depot and getting the killers.
That's excellent. So
Yeah.
that's the thing, right? As we review these Dirty Dozen,
Mm-hmm.
keep in mind is that there's a specific type of pesticide that the environmental working group was looking for, and it's
Okay.
specifically these quote artificial pesticides.
Okay.
So what you just named, the vinegar, etc., those would be considered natural pesticides, which
Mm-hmm.
we assume that these are less harmful to us.
Mhm.
But the artificial pesticides are what you might find at Home Depot and what is typically used, you know, for these non-organic foods by these
Mhm.
large producers.
Mhm.
And the artificial pesticides are, they fall into this class of compound called organophosphates that
Okay.
we know humans have a bad reaction to when we're exposed in large quantities.
Right.
So, like, there have been studies that look at farmers who, unfortunately, in just trying to make a living wage, work with these pesticides because their bosses, who are the growers, use these organophosphate pesticides. And so there's a wide range of exposures and reactions that these farmers can have because um, because of a number of different reasons, right? But so sometimes you can imagine if a farmer is like spraying the pesticides throughout the field, sometimes the wind changes, the direction changes,
Mhm.
and it gets sprayed in their face. So if
Mhm.
there is um, open skin, if skin is free and not covered, or if the pesticides are inhaled, those are sort of the two ways to ingest the greatest amount or to be exposed to the greatest amount of pesticides. And the reactions can range from just kind of a classic rash, an allergic reaction, really mild, to, you know, um, retching. So like vomiting, constant sweating, diarrhea, um, fever, like really awful symptoms. Now, that's not what we see in studies that look at people's uh, pesticide exposure just from eating non-organic foods, because the amount of pesticide that you're exposed to eating an apple after you've already washed it is like pretty low compared to those farmers' exposure. Um, but what the studies have attempted to examine is, well, is there any harm? Can we prove that eating pesticides in non-organic foods, um, eating these artificial pesticides, can we prove that it's linked to uh, harm, to disease, right? To bad health outcomes. And they haven't been able to prove causation, which is kind of it's like a scientific distinction. Can we say that they're related versus can we be sure that this pesticide caused the problem? They have been able to prove association in some studies. So they found in some studies um, over the last couple decades or so that when folks eat largely non-organic diets, there is in certain populations, there is a reduced risk of having a live birth pregnancy. There may be an increased risk of preeclampsia in some populations. Um, and, going down the line, they've found suggestions of or trends that move towards infertility. So like reduced sperm motility in men. And the reason why this is really tricky is, so in science, what we try to get at is like the truth, and we try to understand if this one variable, pesticides, if that is responsible for this other outcome, right? Whatever disease we're talking about, whatever bad health, adverse health outcome we're talking about. And without doing something called a randomized control trial, which is like the gold standard, you don't know for sure whether it's the pesticides that caused it or whether it's something else that kind of tracks with people who are more likely to eat non-organic. So like, are we talking about people who are more likely to live in a city and, shop at a market instead of maybe, farming their own food? Is the issue actually the person's neighborhood that is maybe exposing them to more pollution, and that accounts for um, some of these diseases? Is there some other exposure that can explain why people are having these adverse outcomes? And it just happens by chance that these people also are more likely to eat non-organic diets.
Mhm, mhm.
So, I kind of hesitate to give you advice on whether to eat organic or not. Um, but I want you to have all the information you need, which is that it's possible that as organophosphate pesticides build up in our body from eating lots and lots of non-organic foods, it's possible that maybe there is some harm caused. And then I kind of leave it up to you all to decide where does your risk fall? Like, are you someone who is maybe okay with that risk, and you're thinking, as long as I'm able to eat enough fruits and veggies, then I don't mind this sort of unproven risk of maybe getting uh, more organophosphate pesticides than my body wants, given that we don't know for sure that they cause harm. Is any of that making sense to you guys? It's a difficult balance to strike.
Yes, it's making sense.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
So,
I agree. It does, yes.
thank you for chiming in. Um, I hope that you'll come away with this conversation, and we're not quite done yet, but I hope that you'll come away with the conversation just, uh, you know, just with some thoughts on how to make up your own mind. And I'll give you an example. If I had a patient, for example, um, who had diabetes. So if I was like, in a primary care office taking care of patients, and one walked in with type 2 diabetes, and um, let's say she had gained a lot of weight and that put her at risk for the type 2 diabetes, and it's kind of a new diagnosis. And we're debating, okay, do we start a medication? Do we not? And then we agree, we're going to just give you a trial of eating better and exercising more. And we'll see if, 3 months you can lose some weight, and maybe eating better and exercising more, the diabetes will be managed, and maybe we won't need to give you medications.
Mhm, mhm.
So if that's what we agree to, and then she asked me, so she goes to the grocery store and she says, like, the non-organic fruits and veggies are too, or rather the organic fruits and veggies are too expensive for me to buy. Like, I'm not going to spend the extra 10 to 40% of the price of non-organic buying organic. Then I would say forget organic. Like, the most important thing for you in these 3 months is to develop new habits, eating more fruits and veggies, and to get that fiber and all those antioxidants and all those anti-inflammatory compounds in your body. And that is going to fight your diabetes, which is a more pressing concern right now. I don't want you, because you're determined to eat only organic food, not to get enough nutrition from your diet. So I would, in that case, we'd be weighing kind of nutrition over safety, where nutrition is, am I getting enough of these fruits and veggies, which is really essential to being well, like preventing all of these chronic diseases, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, even many forms of cancer are linked to poor nutrition which eventually leads to obesity. Versus this question of safety that hasn't really played out. We just kind of still don't exactly know what is the safety or potential harm caused by eating non-organic foods with exposure to pesticides. So if I had to weigh the two and someone had a pressing concern related to nutrition, the way that I think about it is I would weight that nutrition concern much more heavily than the safety concern. It gets a little bit more tricky because you can think about, well, so I'll pause there. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Have you guys had to think through how you choose your foods using a framework like that at all, like nutrition versus safety? Or are you just heavy on the safety side? How do you think about it?
This is Cheryl. I am more heavy on the safety side. I think I don't buy a lot of organics because of the price and because when I look at them, compare them in the stores, I don't really see the difference.
Yeah.
I try to do the best I can in terms of washing, because you say science, you can't, take off everything, but
Yeah.
I certainly give it the best shot I can. So I try to, I certainly, after all of the roundup um, suits and information that they put out there, and because of reading the labels about the pesticides and then thinking about what's actually in the soil, you just don't know. So safety is my thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cheryl, you introduced a third variable. So we've been talking about nutrition versus safety, but
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned price too, which is a big consideration for me. I
Mm-hmm.
look at like an organic avocado versus a non-organic avocado. And I'm looking at them like, am I really going to pay 30% more for the organic
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
begin with? Um, so yeah, that's one of the concerns for me. So it's been really helpful for me to have this clean 15 list because right
Mm-hmm.
as Maddie has memorized, avocado is on the clean 15 list. So I can choose the non-organic version of avocado
Mm-hmm.
and not feel that I'm getting extra exposure to pesticides. There's such little pesticide residue on that non-organic avocado that it's kind of similar to the organic version. So I might as well just choose the cheaper non-organic version.
Mm-hmm.
And my
Mm-hmm.
safety isn't compromised. And my pocket is a lot happier. I win
Yes.
safety. Like that's ideal. Um, but then for you, Miss Cheryl, so you grow some things at home, and
Right.
I'm gonna show you guys. I won't let you. We've gone a little bit over, but I won't let you go without showing you this dirty dozen list. If anybody needs to
Okay.
leave, I understand. But especially Miss Cheryl, growing at home, I want to show you this list because these might be the foods where you'd get the most bang for your sort of home farm buck,
Right.
where
Mm-hmm.
leafy greens, so spinach, kale, collards, and mustard greens, they are on the dirty dozen list. You just imagine that sort of leaves growing along the ground. Maybe they leach in, maybe they absorb quite a bit of pesticides. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if you grow any greens at home, but if you do, that's like a great way to avoid having to buy the organic versions,
Right. Right.
the greens at the store.
I do grow the kale and the collards right now.
Oh,
So,
it's so good to hear. Okay, we've got our strawberries that are also on the list. We've got our nectarines and our apples. So, we can kind of flip the framework that we used for the Clean 15 last time.
mm-hmm.
We said, hey, if the food has a thick outer skin that we don't eat, then
Right.
maybe it's relatively protected. Well, think about berries, think about grapes, apples,
Mhm.
nectarines. They don't have thick outer skins, and we do eat, they have thin outer skins, and we eat those skins. So they are on this dirty dozen list where you're more likely to come in contact with pesticide residues for that reason. We've got cherries, we've got peaches on the list, pears. So kind of no surprise there. The majority of this list follows that rule, right? In tomatoes, again, got this thin skin, we eat the skin. What surprised me on this dirty dozen list, so we've got leafy greens is the one rule. Leafy greens are on the dirty dozen.
Mhm.
Um, might want to buy organic. We've got berries and other fruits that are thin skinned, where we eat the skin.
Mhm.
Might want to buy organic. And then the third, I don't have a really great third rule for you, but there are these two outliers, which is basically peppers and celery. So you might say about the peppers, okay, well, they're kind of like, the apples or the pears. They have a thin skin and we eat their skins. All right. So hot peppers like your habanero or your jalapeno, but also
Mhm.
your bell peppers of any color. I don't know why celery is on the list. I don't have a great framework for understanding that, but just sort of keep in mind celery, you might want to buy organic. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's depending on where you each personally fall on that safety versus price versus nutrition balance. These two resources can help you make the best possible decisions for yourself and for your pocketbook in the grocery store.
I agree. They will. Because I'm going to make sure that I have the Clean 15 pictures with me because I don't grow fruits right now. I tried to grow a watermelon, but that didn't work out. But at any rate, this list will be very helpful when I'm in there. Because I can tell the difference between what I grow, and I have a small garden, it's not huge, but I can tell them what I grow and what's in the store and why it looks different and why it feels different. But
Mm,
I was surprised to see the collards and the kale in there. The kale that I grew is not the leafy kind. It's they call it the lacinato. It's thick and curly,
yeah.
and it's a little bit more, I guess, durable.
Mhm.
And I'm in Texas, so that's the one that works better. That's the one that works best.
Nice.
So, and the collards have a thick skin, but not like the thick skin on the Dirty 15.
Mhm.
It's just a thicker leaf, and
Right.
it does it, and it's pretty resistant to a lot of the bugs. But I use flowers, and I do companion garden, so there's flowers that'll keep bugs off of things. So right now, it's a work in progress. It's an experiment, so we'll see how it goes.
Congratulations. Yeah, I hope that you
Thank
give us an update as the seasons continue to change. I would love to hear how your progress is going, Miss Cheryl.
Absolutely, I will let you know that, doctor. Absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions? Anything else to add, guys? Or I let you enjoy your Saturday.
Is there anything that we should look for in the store that just says, no, don't buy this? Is it, I know it's the foods that seem to be deteriorating. And even though I'm in sort of the country now, I'm basically Chicago girl. I know what the food deserts are in the stores that used to pop up in our neighborhood that sold food that just was not good. Is as supermarkets become mega supermarkets, is there something that we should keep I was surprised about the strawberries, I'll tell you that, because I'm
Yeah.
always looking them over and saying I really got to clean these because there's something always hiding somewhere. But is
Yeah.
there something that we should look for that says, this is probably just not a good buy in
Yeah.
terms of the supermarket?
That's a really good question. So we're going to talk about GMO or genetically
Mhm.
modified organisms next week. And
Okay.
one of the reasons people buy organic is that organic means no artificial pesticides and no GMO. Um,
Okay.
or non-GMO.
Okay.
So we'll talk about what exactly GMO can mean for our health.
Okay. Okay.
Um, and soybeans, corn, and papaya are the main fruits and veggies, or I guess the main veggies that are often genetically modified in the US. So just giving you a heads up for next week,
Okay.
depending on how you feel about eating genetically modified organisms, you might want to make sure that each of those, so soybeans would be possibly tofu, like the processed version. You might find tofu in that produce aisle. You might want to find the non-GMO versions or the organic versions of those foods to avoid GMO, if that's like in your risk profile to avoid GMO. And then I get the only other piece of advice I'd have is for fruits and veggies, frozen fruits and veggies are just as nutritious as fresh, which is great. So sometimes like you get a big bag of frozen berries and sometimes they're cheaper. Often I think they're cheaper than berries.
Yes, they are.
So that's something, you know, feel free to buy that. You can use it in smoothies, yogurt, etc. But keep in mind that like if you get canned or if you get frozen and it's frozen in syrup. So if you're getting like canned berries or frozen berries in syrup, in liquid, that would be like my one no-no, because you're just getting a bunch of added sugar in those berries. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen, like you might have strawberries cut up, frozen, but the bag will say frozen in syrup. You want to make sure that it says no sugar added, and it should just be the berries in there. Like you should be able to move the bag around, kind of like how I'm motioning with my fingers, and just feel the berries. And then sometimes you see the cut up slices of peaches in a can or in a container, and they've got syrup around them. You don't want that. That's just a bunch of extra sugar. So that's kind of the big no-no is don't get the extra sugar. That's it.
That's very helpful. Yeah, that's helpful. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. You know, we do these Wednesday evenings at 6 p.m. Central and also Saturday morning. Same conversation each day. So whatever day works for you. And then the recordings will be available if you're not able to make it one week.
Well, this has been very helpful. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
You were so welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Maddie. Okay, you guys have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Have a great weekend. Bye,
You too.
everybody.
Bye-bye.